Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something huge. We're going to look at how England didn't just win a football match against Mexico, but how they completely rewrote their own psychological history in one of the sport's most hostile environments. I mean, this wasn't just another game, right? It was a 3-2 round of 16 World Cup victory that fundamentally rearranged the mood of an entire nation. So we're going to break down the anatomy of this win, how the team totally shifted their mental framework, and what this actually means going forward.
To really get why this victory matters, you literally have to feel the sheer atmospheric pressure of that thunderstorm-delayed kickoff. People were describing the Azteca as roaring like an ancient volcano, with a crowd that sounded like it had been personally hired by Beelzebub. The Azteca isn't just a stadium, it's this massive repository of football memory. England didn't just have to beat 11 players on the pitch. They had to beat the geography, the heat, the altitude, and a furious crowd that was heavily invested in seeing their co-hosts advance. It was, quite literally, a street fight under floodlights.
Section 1. Defying History in Chaos.
For years, England's tournament history has basically been this psychological museum of nearly moments. We all know the old England, right? Nervous, cautious, playing like the ghost of every single penalty shootout since 1990 is just sitting heavy on their chests. But the new England we saw at the Azteca, wow. They were adaptable, they were resilient. Instead of clutching their pearls and retreating into their usual tournament neuroses, this squad actually showed teeth. When the match turned feral, they didn't ask for a committee review, they just fought back.
Section 2. The Bellingham Factor and Emotional Command.
2. Just 2 minutes. That is the staggeringly small window of time it took for Jude Bellingham to strike twice and abruptly strip Mexico of their heroic momentum. And you know, that kind of impact isn't just about raw talent, it's about impeccable timing. Great players score when doubt is just starting to form in the lungs of everyone else in the stadium. Bellingham didn't wait around for permission from the game to make an impact, he completely interrupted it. He forced Mexico to suddenly chase England instead of hosting a massive national celebration. And this brings up an absolutely crucial distinction between leadership and command, because Bellingham isn't just leading the team, he is exercising a deep, infectious command. Think about it like this. Leadership is tactical. It tells people where to stand on a pitch, but command changes what a team fundamentally thinks is possible. Bellingham carries himself with this absolute certainty that forces the entire squad to truly believe they belong in these high-pressure moments, and that kind of belief spreads like wildfire.
But, he didn't do it all by himself. If Bellingham provided the lightning, we absolutely have to recognize Harry Kane as the methodical, priestly lighthouse for this team. Kane secured that vital third goal for England from the penalty spot. That was his 6th goal of the tournament, by the way, keeping him right in the thick of the Golden Boot race. In a match entirely defined by chaos, Kane was the great adult in the room. He was the anchor that steadied the ship when the waves got incredibly high.
Section 3. Surviving the Azteca in a truly feral match.
Knockout football is rarely a neat, organized essay, right? It's more like a pub argument during a power cut. Just look at the absolute emotional roller coaster they had to navigate here. First, there's an hour-long thunderstorm delay. Then, boom, a huge adrenaline surge with Bellingham's quick-fire double. But then, Mexico pulls one back through Quiñones right before the half. And then comes the ultimate test. Jarell Quansah gets a red card. Suddenly, England is playing with 10 men for over 30 minutes, and Ximenez scores to make it 3-2. At that point, all the tactical diagrams went straight out the window, and it became purely about oxygen, panic, and nerve.
There's a famous saying, there is a strange liberation in emergency, and honestly, when reduced to 10 men, the team actually stopped overthinking. The task just became wonderfully primitive. They didn't have the luxury of overcomplicating things anymore. The mandate was incredibly simple. Defend your space, track your runner, win your duel, survive, and whatever you do, do not blink. And England? They didn't blink. Now we really have to pause and respect Mexico's fight here. This victory wouldn't mean nearly as much if the opponent had just rolled over. Mexico played with the force of an entire country that believed this tournament belonged to them. Those goals from Julian Quiñones and Raúl Jiménez dragged England into some deep, agonizing discomfort. Up 3-2, England wasn't cruising at all. They were desperately clinging on, totally forced to suffer for the win. But, from an England perspective, suffering and still winning, that is the ultimate proof of progress.
Section 4. The Norway Problem and a Brutal Exam.
Okay, we need to put the celebration bunting away for a minute. Because Norway, they're no longer just a charming underdog story. They are incredibly dangerous. They just knocked out heavyweights Brazil with a 2-1 victory, booking their first ever quarterfinal appearance. And they did it on the back of a deadly brace from their superstar striker, Erling Haaland.
Someone called Erling Haaland football's battering ram with Wi-Fi, and I mean, how perfect is that? It perfectly captures his terrifying efficiency. He isn't out there to decorate the game with subtle, pretty passes. He's there to turn half chances into absolute national emergencies. If England repeats any of that defensive looseness or chaos they showed after the red card against Mexico, Haaland will happily and completely ruin their summer, no question.
So the upcoming quarterfinal is going to be a completely different beast. Surviving the passionate, deafening cauldron of the Azteca against Mexico, that was a massive test of emotional endurance. But stopping Norway requires an entirely different, highly disciplined mindset. Norway is going to be a cold, brutal exam of pure concentration. One single slip in focus and the tournament is over.
Section 5. A new tournament team discovering a spine. Because the recipe for a genuine tournament-winning side isn't actually perfection. It's this very specific sequence of resilience. Look at how it aligned for England. First, Bellingham delivered the wild inspiration. Second, Kane delivered the calm authority. Third, the defense was forced to deliver the suffering when they went down to 10 men. And finally, the team as a whole delivered the answer. This is exactly how a team discovers its spine during a crisis. It's that pivotal moment they stop being just a collection of expensive stars and become a real, formidable tournament side.
England went to the Azteca, and they did not shrink. Think about the decades of World Cup trauma this nation carries, walking into that unimaginable noise, conceding twice, losing a man to a red card, and still finding a way to advance. That is nothing short of revolutionary. They shook hands with chaos, and they absolutely did not back down. And that alone totally changes how a team sees itself.
Which brings us to the big question. With heavyweights like France, Argentina, and Spain still lurking out there in the bracket like expensive sharks, I want to leave you with this final thought. You know, talent, money, and hype, those have never been England's problem. What they've lacked for decades is a calm relationship with chaos. So after surviving the Azteca in the most feral way possible, has England finally discovered the missing psychological piece required to win it all? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll let you ponder that one until next time.